And so I was just wanted to get your thoughts on this subject of courageous conversation and how you see it as making connection and informing, supporting this re-relationship with our ancestors, reconnecting to them, remembering them in certain ways, and bringing them into our lives to be more active present.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your framing around this courageous conversations. And one of the things that comes up for me is when we're talking about even just this idea of having these conversations, either say with a parent or with a grandparent, or there's already the common responses that we have in our nervous system are the survival responses, right? Either we freeze, either we fawn, or we people please and say, whatever other people would say, I would just take it in, smile around it and, go about it as okay. Or we might even be in that flight mode, of, oh, I don't want to get into this. I'm just gonna jump out of it and not address it. Or we can go into our fight mode of be defensive and then go neck on neck around the topic. So for me, there is that, these are our survival responses when it comes to engaging within situations that we feel, threatened, we feel uncomfortable with, that we feel that, hey, there might be something here that would open further wounds or further disconnection. So our bodies are just primed with those reflex responses already. And what I see in terms of how these courageous conversations can be is how can we invite other responses in? And these are, more of the learned responses that we can introduce to our nervous system. And in one of the articles that I wrote about it is how can we invite softening, in spaces where we feel hardened by these stories or by these conversations? How can we soften? How can we invite flocking? That rather than moving away, is we lean in with each other and say, hey, okay, like what you said, Naita, let's get into a collective understanding of what this history is about, or what this tension is about, or what this story is about. Or how can we get into flow? That we lean into curiosity and say, okay, there might be uncomfortable situations here, but I am inviting more of that understanding that whatever would unfold. And going with the energy of what is there would allow for you to also, mirror back to what are the things that, that you can address, or that you can turn to. And then the last learned response for me is, how can we just surrender? How can we find that in this uncomfortable space, that even though there might be some, tension, but there is trust in each other, with each other, that we are able to hold space for each other and surrender to what, to what can unfold. So for me, that is my, my invitation for myself is to notice, what are my survival responses in this, in these conversations, and how I can lean into courage by remembering, what are the other responses that I can take into.
I feel that it is a conscious choice to decide to hold space, to decide to welcome, as I say to sometimes, to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, recognizing that there may be some tension in the space, but that we've invited the tension in, and we're also not trying to run away from the tension. And we're also trying to understand, where is it coming from and why do we have it in the first place, which is this curiosity that you mentioned. And being able to have that openness. But is it something that is easy to, well, I guess I would ask the question, what frame or space does someone have to be in for that to be enabled? Because I could imagine that 3 people out of a group of 6 people would be ready for this, but the other 3 are like, I'm going in the opposite direction. So how might you want to cultivate and try and hold that space? What might need to happen for those individuals?
Good enough for now, safe enough to try. So it, of course, it varies within people, right? But how can we get to an understanding of, okay, and this is why there's a difference between a courageous or a brave conversation as compared to a safer conversation, right? In safer spaces, there is, an understanding of, if it gets to be too much, then I can retreat, and then that's okay, right? In courageous conversations, you take it in you to say, okay, I know that there would be, points of tension, but I'm going with with this good enough for now, safe enough to try, and lean into that, and then see where things can go. And for me, in those spaces where I've invited this principle in, this sociocracy principle in, it has allowed me to just make those incremental steps in saying, okay, maybe this is how I'd want to go about it for now. And then look at it from, maybe next time there can be a deepening to that conversation. And then another rule for me is moving away from the golden rule to applying more the platinum rule. And in the platinum rule, it's do unto others what others would want to be treated. So it's also an understanding of needs. What does the other person need in this given context? And how can we meet each other's needs? So rather than saying, oh, and this is a very good example, whenever I get into conflict, say, for example, with my husband, my need for, I want to talk about this now, and his need for space oftentimes can clash. So how can we meet each other in our different needs? And I'm reminded in nonviolent communication, in the practice of meeting each other's needs, is to know that actually we can all meet each other in our field of needs. It's the strategies that we use where conflicts arise. So my strategy for communication might be, I want to talk now. And his strategy for having space is, I want to leave the room now. So how can we find the strategies that can meet each other's needs and be in that space of connection rather than disconnection?